There's something about thunderstorms that brings out the darkest corners of our world. And sometimes those corners look right back at us. Tonight's story isn't fiction. It isn't a movie script or an internet creepypasta. It's a true account from someone who swears every word happened just a few weeks ago. And judging by the ending, it may not even be over yet. So, grab your blanket, dim the lights, and listen carefully to the rain tapping against your window. Because before this night is over, you might find yourself double-checking your locks. This is the Thunderstorm Woman, a true story about what waits outside your window when the sky goes dark and the thunder hides the sound of something else moving just beneath it. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the true thunderstorm horror stories. But don't relax too much, because this one starts with a sound that never left the narrator's head. It started with the sound of rain, not the storm itself, but the faint patter that comes before it, like the earth was whispering a warning I didn't yet understand. My name isn't really important, and honestly, after everything that's happened, I'm not sure I want it to be. What I can tell you is that I live in a suburb that toes the line between civilization and wilderness, where paved streets end in silence and the forest begins without asking permission. If you stand on my back porch, you can see the tree-lined thick oaks and maples intertwined with vines and ferns so dense that daylight struggles to reach the forest floor. Past that, maybe a quarter mile in, there's a narrow road, old and cracked, half swallowed by weeds. Beyond that road lies something I've known all my life, but never truly understood: the water. Everyone in the neighborhood just calls it the reservoir, but no one really knows if that's what it is. It's massive, still flat, and always strangely darker than it should be, even on sunny days. The entire perimeter is wrapped in a 10-foot-tall chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. Faded no trespassing and government property signs hang at intervals, half buried in rust, swaying in the wind. When I was younger, my friends and I dared each other to get close, to touch the fence, to look through it. Sometimes, late at night, we'd ride our bikes down there just to scare each other. I remember one summer evening when I leaned in close to the wire and swore I could hear something moving under the surface of the water, like a current, but slower, more deliberate. We used to joke that it was haunted, that the government dumped bodies there, or that it was some kind of old chemical testing site. My cousin Nick, who's older and deep into conspiracy stuff, once told me the reservoir wasn't even water at all, that it was a containment pit for classified material. I laughed then. I don't laugh now, because over the years, I noticed something that always bothered me. The water never changed. It didn't rise or fall with rain, didn't freeze in winter, didn't shimmer in summer. It just existed, still, silent, watching. But life went on. I'm a runner, varsity cross country at my school. Every season, I need to log hundreds of miles before the first meet, and I'm always chasing new routes to break the monotony. The wooded path behind my house became my favorite quiet green and perfectly 2 miles in a loop. I'd start in my backyard, weave through the trees, past the road by the reservoir, and circle back. It was peaceful, at least it used to be. It was late July when things began to shift. That afternoon, the air felt heavy, electric, like the world was holding its breath. You could taste the coming storm on your tongue, that metallic tang in the wind. I'd gone out for a twilight run. The clouds above were rolling in fast, bruised purple and gray. The woods felt thicker that evening, the light dimmer than usual, though the sun hadn't yet set. Halfway through the run, as I turned onto the road near the reservoir, I noticed something strange. There was movement in the trees. Not the quick, twitchy movement of a bird or squirrel, slower, heavier, like something pacing me between the trunks. I told myself it was a deer, or maybe just my own echo bouncing back weird in the thick air. But when I stopped, the sound stopped too. Then a breath, a single exhale from somewhere behind me. I turned, scanning the shadows. Nothing but rain-heavy leaves and branches. The first thunderclap rolled across the sky like a warning, and that was enough for me to start moving again. I sprinted the last half-mile home. By the time I got back, the rain had started, slow at first, then hammering the roof in relentless waves. Inside, my mom was watching TV, my dad half asleep on the couch, and everything felt so normal it almost made me laugh at myself. But something about that run stuck in my chest, an unease I couldn't shake. Maybe it was the sound I'd heard. Maybe it was the feeling of being watched. Or maybe it was the faint scent that clung to me even after I showered. A faint smell of stagnant water, like the air near a dock. 2 days later, I decided to check the reservoir in daylight. I told myself I was just curious, wanted to see it up close again. But really, I think I wanted proof that there was nothing wrong with it, that it was just a weird neighborhood landmark. The sun was out, but the air was still hazy from the storm. Steam rose off the asphalt as I walked down the narrow road that cut through the woods. When I reached the fence, I froze. Someone had cut through it. It wasn't obvious, not unless you got close. But the bottom corner near the old oak tree had been pried up just enough to let something, or someone, crawl underneath. The metal edges were sharp and fresh, like they'd been cut recently. I crouched down, peering through. The grass inside was flattened, leading toward the water. And that's when I noticed something else. Near the edge of the water, just barely visible through the haze, was a single white object. A piece of cloth. It fluttered gently in the breeze, then stilled, half soaked in the mud. I took a step closer, then stopped myself. I don't know why, but something deep inside whispered not to go any farther. My skin crawled. My heartbeat quickened. I backed away and jogged home, convincing myself it was nothing, maybe kids messing around. But that night, as the storm returned, I lay awake listening to the rain and thunder, and beneath it all, I swore I heard something else. Not the wind, not the trees. Something like a woman's voice, soft, crying. The next few days passed in a blur of normal routines. My runs, schoolwork, dinner with my parents. Everything looked the same, yet I couldn't shake a tension that had settled beneath my skin. Every time I passed a window or opened the back door, I half expected to see someone standing at the edge of the trees. The weather didn't help. The sky stayed heavy and gray, the air thick with that strange charged stillness that means another storm is coming. By late afternoon on the fourth day, thunder was already rumbling far off to the west. I remember the way the birds went silent all at once, as if they knew what was about to roll through. When the first drops of rain started to fall, I felt a weird kind of relief. The waiting was over. The sky could finally break open. I've always liked storms, the way they make the world sound alive. That night I left my window cracked to listen to the rain, stretched out on my bed with a book, half reading, half dozing. Somewhere between one thunderclap and the next, I heard it, a sound that didn't belong. It was faint at first, just a tremor of noise beneath the patter of rain. I thought it might be an animal crying out, maybe one of the raccoons that lived near the shed. But then I caught a shape in the sound, a rhythm that didn't fit with the natural world. It was sobbing. I sat up slowly, thinking I'd misheard, but the sound came again. Short gasps, then a quiet voice, muffled by the storm but unmistakably human. "Help me! I'm cold." Every muscle in my body tensed. For a second, I couldn't move. Then instinct took over. Someone was hurt out there. I threw on a sweatshirt and shoes, grabbed the flashlight from my dresser, and ran downstairs. The storm hit me like a wall as soon as I stepped outside. The rain was so heavy I could barely see the end of the porch. I rounded the side of the house toward my bedroom window, shouting into the dark. My own voice vanished in the noise. She was there. A woman crouched beneath the window ledge, arms wrapped around her knees. Her clothes were white, maybe a nightgown, maybe a thin dress. Water streamed off her hair. She looked fragile, broken by the cold. "Hey," I shouted over the thunder. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" She didn't answer. She lifted her head, and for an instant our eyes met. Hers were wide, the pupils swallowing nearly all the color, her skin pale under the flashes of lightning. Then she moved. It wasn't a stumble or a slow rise. She sprang to her feet and rushed toward me with sudden, violent energy. My flashlight beam jerked wildly across her face, catching her expression just before she reached me, something between desperation and fury. I froze. She was inches away when she stopped, as if an invisible hand had pulled her back. Her head tilted to the side, like she was studying me, and then she turned sharply and ran toward the woods. Barefoot, the rain swallowed her. One blink, and she was gone. I stood there, soaked, heart slamming against my ribs. For a long moment, I didn't know what to do. My legs finally started moving again, carrying me back inside. I woke my dad, words tumbling out so fast he barely understood me. He didn't question much. Maybe it was the look on my face. We checked the locks, every door and window. The house felt smaller, quieter, once we were sure everything was closed. He suggested calling the police. I wanted to, but it was past midnight and the storm was still raging. What would we even say? That a woman had appeared and then vanished into the trees? We decided to wait until morning. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the roar of rain louder than ever. At some point, exhaustion dragged me under. The next morning, the sky was clear and blue, as if nothing had happened. There were no footprints in the mud beneath my window, no sign anyone had been there. My dad said maybe it had been a dream, or that I'd seen someone from the neighborhood trying to find shelter. I almost believed him. Almost. But when I stepped outside that afternoon, a single white thread hung from the bush near my window. Thin, soaked, and frayed, like a piece torn from the edge of a dress. That was the first time I truly felt afraid. For a few days after that night, life tried to slide back into its usual rhythm. My dad said the thread on the bush could have come from anywhere. My mom, when she heard the story, told me that people wander during storms all the time, that the woman had probably gone to a shelter. Their words sounded reasonable enough, but none of them settled in my chest. I knew what I had seen. Running helped, or at least it used to. I told myself that getting back into the woods would make things normal again. The first 2 mornings I stayed close to the house, looping the streets where cars and sprinklers made noise. By the 3rd morning, curiosity outweighed fear. I missed the quiet, the smell of pine and earth, the rhythm of my feet on the narrow dirt path. The sky was a thin, washed-out blue that day. The ground still held moisture from the storm, soft and dark. When I reached the bend where the path meets the old road, I slowed down. The fence around the reservoir gleamed weightily through the trees. I didn't expect to see anything. I just wanted to pass, to look for proof that I hadn't imagined the gap in the fence. It was still there. The bottom corner near the oak was pried up, the grass flattened. Someone had been through recently. And then I saw her. She was sitting on the bank inside the fence, knees drawn to her chest, her bare feet dangling into the water. The same white dress clung to her, darker now, heavy with mud. Her head was tilted slightly, as though she were listening to something under the surface. My pace slowed to nothing. A part of me thought I should call out, ask if she needed help, but my voice wouldn't come. The world felt muted, the air too thick. Maybe she heard my breathing, or maybe the crunch of gravel under my shoe. Her head turned. For a long moment, she didn't move at all, and I knew without a doubt that it was the same woman from that storm. She stood. Her movements were wrong somehow, stiff but fast, like she had to remember how her joints worked. She came toward the fence in a straight line, eyes locked on mine. When she reached the chain link, she pressed her face against it, until her cheek flattened against the metal. "You came back," she said. Her voice was soft, calm, but something in it made the hair on my arms lift. "I'm going to call someone," I said, though my words shook. She smiled. It stretched too far, the corners of her mouth pulling back until it looked painful. Before I could move, she turned, ran toward the water, and dove. The sound was small, a clean cut into the surface. Ripples spread, then stilled. I stood frozen, waiting for her to come up. The seconds dragged out. Nothing broke the surface again. When I finally got my phone out, my hands were shaking too much to type. The dispatcher's voice sounded distant as I tried to explain what had happened. I stayed where I was until 2 officers arrived. They walked the fence, shone flashlights over the water, though it was broad daylight. They said they'd file a report and that someone would follow up if anything turned up. One of them told me not to worry. People swim in restricted reservoirs sometimes. But I saw the way he looked at the fence, at the clean cut in the metal. They left, and I jogged home, though I barely remember the route. That night, the sky cleared again, but I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face pressed against the fence, that strange stillness before she smiled. I told myself she had drowned, or that she was never real to begin with. Both thoughts were terrible in their own way. 2 nights later, the noises began. Not the voice, not crying. Just the sound of movement, soft steps on wet leaves, the faint scrape of something brushing against the siding of the house. I would sit up in bed and listen until my heart hurt from beating too fast. My dad said raccoons. My mom said the storm must have loosened the branch. I said nothing. The next morning I found footprints on the back deck, small and bare, the pattern of toes clear in the thin layer of mud left by last night's drizzle. I didn't run after that. Days turned into a week. The weather settled into a strange rhythm of calm mornings and violent evenings. The air would start to hum around sunset, then thunder would crawl across the sky and shake the windows. Each time it happened, the same tight feeling doubted in my stomach. I tried to convince myself it was all coincidence, that the woman had been a trespasser, maybe unstable, and that the storm had hidden how she got in or out of the fence. I tried not to think about the footprints on the deck, or the way the motion light flickered on at odd hours of the night. The cameras went up on a Saturday. My dad and I spent the afternoon mounting them under the eaves and along the back porch. He joked about raccoons setting them off and told me that once we had proof of whatever was wandering at night, the house would finally feel normal again. I laughed with him, but the sound came out thin. That night, it rained again. I stayed awake long after everyone else had gone to bed, watching the live feed from the cameras on my phone. The rain looked like static, streaks of white across the screen. Nothing moved beyond that curtain of water. Midnight came and went. I started to feel stupid for staring so hard at nothing. At 1:17, the motion alert pings. I swiped open the feed. For a second, all I saw was the glare of the porch light through the rain. Then the shape appeared, tall, thin, barely visible through the blur. It stood just beyond the deck railing. The figure leaned forward, and a pale hand slid up into view, fingers long and slow. Then the image jumped and went dark. The feed came back a few seconds later. The deck was empty. The timer in the corner of the screen had skipped forward 12 seconds. I went outside in the morning, half hoping to find nothing at all. The deck boards were dry, except for a single wet patch beneath the railing, shaped roughly like a footprint. When I showed my dad the footage, he frowned and said the rain had probably confused the sensor. But when I pointed out the missing seconds on the timestamp, he didn't answer. After that, he started locking the doors twice before bed. I began hearing things from the woods again. Not just rustling voices, or what could have been voices, carried in the wind. Sometimes it was laughter, sometimes just a low murmur that stopped as soon as I held my breath to listen. Nick came over one afternoon with his laptop. He said he'd been digging around online and found something about the reservoir. A decommissioned site from the 1980s, listed in some archive under a code name, Project Alassa. According to a few obscure posts on old message boards, it was supposed to be part of a psychological research program. Something about isolation, water immersion, and sound frequencies. He leaned across the table, his voice dropping. They said they shut it down after someone disappeared out there. No record of who. I wanted to tell him it was nonsense. But the idea planted itself in my head like a seed, and that night I dreamed of dark water. I dreamed of standing on the shore and seeing a pale shape beneath the surface, a face rising toward me, mouth open in silence. I woke up gasping, my sheets damp with sweat, thunder rolling somewhere far off. The next day, I noticed scratches on my bedroom window. Thin, curved lines running down the glass as if something had pressed its nails there. I tried to wipe them away with a cloth, but they were etched in. That evening I moved a chair to the middle of the room so I could sit with my back to the wall and watch the window. The storm came again, heavy and unrelenting. At first there was only rain. Then came the sound I'd been dreading. 3 slow taps against the glass. I lifted the flashlight, my hand shaking, and aimed it toward the window. Lightning flashed before the beam caught anything, and in that flash I saw her. She was inches from the glass, hair plastered across her face, eyes dark and empty. Water streamed down her cheeks, though it wasn't clear if it was rain or something else. Her mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear over the thunder. I stumbled back, knocking over the chair. When I looked again, the window was empty. The glass was wet, but unbroken. The house was silent, except for the rain. I sat there until dawn, waiting for the light. By morning, the scratches on the window were deeper. I told myself I'd go to the police again, or maybe stay with a friend until the storms passed, but I never did. Something in me was afraid to leave, afraid of what might follow. The last clear memory I have of that week is standing on the back porch, staring at the line of trees. The air smelled of rain and iron. Between 2 of the trunks, for just a moment, I saw the white of a dress and the shape of someone watching. Then the wind rose and the trees swayed, and she was gone. I went back inside and locked the door. The final storm came without warning. No slow build of clouds, no rumble of thunder in the distance. One moment the evening was calm, the next the sky split open. The air turned green, and the wind carried that sharp scent of ozone that makes your skin crawl before lightning even strikes. By then the whole house had learned to brace for storms. My mom filled flashlights, my dad unplugged electronics. I sat on my bed staring at the window, telling myself this time would be the same as any other night of rain and thunder. I even tried music, a podcast, anything to fill the space between the flashes of light. At 9:42, the power went out. The house sighed into silence, only the roar of wind and rain against the siding. My phone glowed in my hand. I told myself not to check the cameras, that I didn't want to know what might be outside. Then the screen lit on its own, a single notification from an unknown number. "Can you help me? I'm cold." The same words. I wanted to throw the phone, but my fingers tightened around it instead. I turned the flashlight on and aimed it at the window. For a second, the beam caught nothing but rain. Then, as lightning cracked above the trees, I saw her. She was standing in the yard, not crouched or hidden this time. The rain poured through her, almost as if she were made of it. Her dress clung to her body, gray now instead of white. She lifted her face to the window and smiled, slow and deliberate. I ran downstairs shouting for my dad. He met me at the bottom, already moving toward the back door. He thought it was an intruder, a real person, and didn't wait for me to explain. The moment he opened the door, a gust of wind slammed into us, carrying rain and the smell of the reservoir. We stepped out together. The yard was empty. The rain eased for a heartbeat, and the only sound was water dripping from the gutters. Then a splash echoed from the woods, too heavy to be rain. We followed the sound to the edge of the trees. My flashlight beam found the path I used to run. The mud churned with footprints that disappeared after a few steps. The smell of stagnant water was stronger there. My dad called out, his voice barely carrying over the storm. No answer. We turned back toward the house, and that's when I saw the figure at the fence line, half hidden behind the trees. She was watching us. Her eyes caught the light and glowed faintly, like reflections in deep water. Before I could speak, she raised her hand, palm outward, as though she were pressing it against invisible glass. Then she turned and walked toward the direction of the reservoir, her steps silent on the wet ground. We didn't follow. My dad locked the doors, checked the windows twice, and told me to stay downstairs. He didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer answers. The rest of the night passed in fragments of noise. The storm, the occasional creak of wood, the faint splash of water somewhere far away. At dawn, the power came back. The world looked scrubby clean, the air bright and cold. My dad went outside to check the yard. When he came back, his face was pale. He said nothing, just handed me my phone. It was lying in the grass near the trees, the screen cracked but still on. The same number had sent another message at 3:07 a.m. You shouldn't have followed me. The police came later that day. They walked the property, looked at the cut fence near the reservoir, listened to our explanations. They told us to stay inside during storms and report any further trespassing. One of them, an older officer with tired eyes, stayed behind for a moment after the others left. He asked quietly if we'd ever heard of people seeing things near that water before. When we said no, he nodded once, as if that confirmed something for him. Don't go near it, he said. Whatever's in there doesn't belong anywhere else. Then he got in his car and drove off. The days since have blurred together. The scratches on my window have multiplied, thin and white like cracks in ice. At night, I hear water moving, even when it isn't raining. Sometimes it sounds like it's beneath the house. I haven't gone running again. The path has grown wild, the weeds tall, and the mud hardening into new shapes. But sometimes, when I stand at the kitchen window, I see a shimmer of white between the trees. It stays still until I look away, and when I look back, it's gone. Nick keeps sending me links, old scanned documents, and fragments of government memos. He says the project by the reservoir wasn't about research on sound or isolation after all. It was about containment. They built the site over something they found in the lakebed, something that didn't stay buried. He thinks the woman is part of it, what they were trying to keep from spreading. I tell him to stop. But even as I delete his messages, part of me wonders if he's right. Last night, the wind rose again. Thunder rolled, low and distant. I told myself it was just another summer storm. But when the first drops hit the roof, I felt that same electric tension in the air. I went to the window, half expecting to see her. The yard was empty. The rain grew heavier, washing the world into silver and black. Then, for the briefest second, lightning lit the woods, and I saw a reflection in the glass instead of my own. Her face was calm, her eyes hollow. She lifted her hand, touched the inside of the window, and mouthed the words I first heard weeks ago. "Can you help me? I'm cold." The light faded. My reflection returned. Now the storm is building again. The lights flicker. I can hear water moving in the walls, a slow trickle that shouldn't be there. If anyone finds this, stay away from the reservoir on the other side of the woods. When the rain starts, close your windows. Don't listen for voices. Don't look outside. Because she's still waiting, somewhere in that dark water, and every storm brings her a little closer.